been there before. We've been there multiple times. We know that when we're down, we're never out. We have guys that fight 24/7 the whole 48 minutes. And we know what we're capable of.
How about these guys behind you as a team? You guys really outlasted this road trip and finished it out strong.
Yeah, we didn't start it the way we wanted to, but we respond. That's what good teams do. We respond to adversity, and we're so close that when adversity hits, we know exactly what to do.
Words for tonight. Let's go.
And how to respond.
Go home.
Thank you, Shay. Thank you guys very much.
Welcome into the Thunder basketball universe. That was the scene right after the Thunder defeat the Minnesota Timberwolves in just dramatic fashion. That game had so many ups and downs, and it took a full team effort, just like that walk-off interview with you right there, Nick.
It certainly was a full team effort on that walk-off. I think there were 5 people in that shot, enough for a 5-man unit out there on the floor. So, a great comeback win, and obviously the Thunder very happy to be home after ending that road trip nicely before the next one begins.
Yeah, home for a very short amount of time, not a long time, just enough time to record this podcast. We're recording this on Monday, January 22nd, which means the Thunder plays the Portland Trailblazers for it's their only game here at home this week. Play the Portland Trailblazers tomorrow, and then they hit the road. They're out to San Antonio on the second night of a back-to-back, and that starts a 3-game road trip for them.
Yeah, so that trip will finish out a stretch of 11 of 14 games on the road in this month of January. Just a brutal stretch. Every team goes through one of them.
Yeah.
We certainly benefited from a heavy home schedule in the month of December, but these are the dog days, and the Thunder has done a great job of just rolling with the punches.
Yeah, and January is always a haul, really. Every single season, it seems like this part of the season right here, right when you get towards the midway point, and right when you're like really it's just cold outside, and games are just happening left and right. But that's something that this team seems to thrive off of, that adversity, and has a really good relationship with, challenges that come their way.
Yeah, that's something that this team has done historically. It all goes back to that 0-0 mindset and the 48-minute type of team. We actually got a great story from Mark Daignault earlier this morning at practice about the genesis of the 0-0 mindset. He said that it was actually one of his years as the G League head coach that he was with the Thunder in the playoffs. And after a big-time win in the playoffs, the Thunder came back in the locker room, and he said Nick Collison got in front of the group, which was kind of a rare thing, but this is a guy whose number is in the rafters here at Paycom Center, and he said, "Hey, happy teams lose. We got to get back to 0-0," and that really stuck with Mark in a very profound way, and that's what's carry that forward here for this team. And
clearly the Thunder just leaning into that, buying into that, and it's serving them well, because the Thunder had a really tough road trip that they had to go through, the Western Conference road trip that they were just on, playing the Lakers, playing the Clippers, playing the Jazz, and playing the Timberwolves. And that stretch, that 4 just very high level teams, and they each gave the Thunder their very best punch. But before we get to the recap of this entire road trip, there were some other elements to this road trip that blessed our timeline, including that walk-off interview. I'm so glad we started with that, because that was the most wholesome thing. I couldn't stop watching it. I couldn't stop smiling. Yeah. It was like when you're like presenting in front of a class, and it's like, your parents might see you, or I don't know. It was just like such proud like parents behind Shay right there. It was just so wholesome.
Shay's look back at J-Dub is just on the in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And what Shay had to say afterwards too
post-game.
About
all
right, kids, I'm going to turn this car around if you don't stop messing around back there.
He said, I don't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
I just knew the kids were misbehaving behind me. It's so good. Okay, so that was one thing that blessed our timeline, but we had a couple of other things that happened on this trip that really blessed our timeline. Nick, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, so in this tough month of January, sometimes you need those things to just kind of rev up your spirits, and we were very blessed to have a couple things here. The first of which was Michael Cage, our very own Michael Cage on our Bally Sports Oklahoma broadcasts, our analyst, former NBA player for 15 years. He finally, at long last, got his jersey retired by San Diego State University. An amazing honor for Michael. He was able to slip down to San Diego after our games in Los Angeles, and they rolled out the red carpet for Michael there.
As they should.
Yeah, and it was he came back, and I sat next to Michael on the plane, and when he came back to us, he missed the game in Utah. Our very own Paris Lawson did an unbelievable job filling in as analyst on that game against the Jazz.
Some big shoes to fill, literally.
Literally and metaphorically, but you did an incredible job.
Thank you.
And And Michael came back to us in Minnesota, and we got to kind of catch up with him. And he just was gushing about how special it was, all the interviews that they had lined up for him afterwards, the way that they honored him on the court. Our very own Dan Mahoney, who's a friend of the pod, he actually snuck down to San Diego to get some footage and make sure that we had a man on the scene there to capture Michael being able to hold up that plaque with his jersey inside of it.
What's crazy about all of this is just how beloved Michael is at San Diego State. His jersey was retired and raised into the rafters along with 2 other folks from San Diego State. But talking to him about this, I remember we were at dinner. All of us were at dinner one night in Los Angeles, and he was like, it's been 40 years.
Yeah.
I've been wandering through the desert here.
It's like that meme from Titanic.
It's been 87 years.
Yeah.
It's literally been so long. And what's funny is that his jersey was actually retired after his last game. So like as soon as his last game ended at San Diego State, they gave him the mic. No one else is ever going to wear jersey number 44. But they didn't put it in the rafters.
It wasn't up in the rafters.
It wasn't up in the rafters. It was just kind of a
silent thing.
Yeah. And so finally, 40 years later, that jersey goes way back like car seats.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Been waiting all day to say that.
Yeah, Paris really lined that one up well. And so, Michael really was a trailblazer. I mean, he was the first big recruit that San Diego State ever got. He was, lottery pick then, not long after, just, was actually drafted by the San Diego Clippers. Yeah. He tells this great story about how he bought a house in San Diego shortly after being drafted. And maybe a couple weeks later, he got a phone call and said, hey, by the way, the team's moving to LA. So he was really the first LA Clipper.
Yeah.
And so that was a really fascinating. He was the last San Diego Clipper and the first LA Clipper. So kind of a fascinating backstory to him, kind of choosing this guy coming from West Memphis, Arkansas, going all the way out to San Diego State, forging a great reputation there, becomes a lottery pick, and then gets to stay there to begin his NBA journey too.
And just has a great legacy amongst all the folks out there in San Diego. I'm surprised they didn't give him a key to the city while he was there. I mean, he's truly so beloved in that city. So it was really awesome that Michael got his well-deserved recognition at his alma mater. That was so fun to see.
We thought that he couldn't be more beloved than he is here in Oklahoma City, but it's certainly rivaling it.
It definitely does. All right, here's my Bless Your Timeline. And since we're on the topic of jersey retirements, notably big men jersey retirements, another one took place on this very same road trip, which, sidebar, this just goes to show how long this road trip was.
Yeah. You had 2 jersey retirements in the same road trip.
In one road trip. Yeah. And this one actually took place before the last game. It was the last stop on the road trip in Minnesota. The one and only Chet Holmgren had his jersey retired at his high school alma mater, Minnehaha Academy. And this was so special because we saw earlier this season when the team went to Dallas, it was Jaylin Williams who got his jersey retired. Now, that was a 2-hour drive to Waco, Texas, the night before a game. And yet, all of his teammates jumped in that bus and they made that trip down with him. The same thing happened right as the team landed in Minnesota. They put their bags away, the buses were waiting, and those buses were filled all the way up. All of the teammates were there. And just about every human being in Minnesota, I believe, was in that gym at Minnehaha Academy.
It was the only warm place in all of Minnesota.
This is true.
Paris and I were sweating in there.
Exactly. There were so many people at this jersey retirement. But again, it's really cool to see, guys like Michael Cage, where, they've made their stamp and they've made made some history at a place and had such a large influence. And to go back to that place and see the faces that they impacted, that is so cool. And so to go to Chet's alma mater, see his former coaches, see some of his former teammates and teachers, and he was just getting highs and waves and hugs from everybody, it seemed like. And of course, fans, because he is Chet Holmgren after all. And so right before the boys basketball game, they turned the lights off, they turned on the projector, they had this awesome video of his former coaches just, talking about how Chet made such an impact. And then they finally gave him his jersey, and it's gonna go up in the rafters for forever.
It was so cool to see him and his parents sitting there on the bench, the same bench that he used to sit on, but his teammates sitting in the seats behind him. Chet told us that was so surreal to have so many of his teammates walking in the halls of his high school. And then, of course, as soon as the ceremony was over, they all kind of descended from the rafters, came down and mobbed him at center court. So that was so much fun. We just were gushing about Michael Cage, but now it's our opportunity to tease him a little bit. Michael was drafted in the 1984 NBA draft and is just now getting his jersey retired by San Diego State officially. Yeah. Chet Holmgren was drafted in the 2022 NBA draft and has already got his high school jersey retired. It's just a hilarious juxtaposition.
Because Chet is 21 years old and it's 20 years before Chet was born. Yes. It was when Michael Cage finished playing at San Diego State. And that was just incredible. And I loved hearing all of Chet's teammates talk about why they went, because I mean, it wasn't mandatory. Let's be very clear. Like, someone probably just sent in a group text like, hey, Chet's getting his jersey retired. And they, somebody responds, great, what time's the bus leave? Yeah. Like, there was no question, no hesitation. And Shea afterward was like, we're not missing that. Like, that's really cool. And we love these guys. Like, all of these guys are around the same age. And we heard from Coach Dagnall, he said that could do one of two things. It could make, one, a very competitive, kind of hostile environment, or it could be a very communal environment where everybody is just kind of, going through things together and experiencing things together. And it's more the latter with this group. And you see that with how these guys rally around each other on and off the floor.
Well, and just even logistically speaking, it's the end of a long road trip, which is following up another long road trip before that to the East Coast. It's January. Guys have got bumps and bruises. It's -2 degrees outside.
-2 degrees.
A million excuses in the world for any NBA player to have said, nah, I'm sitting this one out.
Right.
Sorry, can't do it. I need to get some rest. And these guys are like, nope, we're there. And not only that, they go and they outlast the Minnesota Timberwolves next night. And the guys all made that connection a little bit in the post-game interviews. It's like, the reason that we can do this stuff on the court is because of the way that we are with each other off of the court. And that the connections of this group actually make it a lot easier for you to be able to play and trust and fight alongside these guys in the trenches.
Nick, that was a textbook transition to our next topic.
Got a lot of experience together here, Paris, on the TBU.
That was legendary. That was so good. Because we need to recap this road trip and, most importantly, really recap this last win against the Minnesota Timberwolves, because it was an electric atmosphere inside of Target Center. I mean, it was an awesome game between these two teams. I mean, really, the whole road trip, great games, high-level opponents. The Thunder didn't necessarily play the way they wanted to play against the Lakers. They learned a lot, though, from that game. Same thing against the Clippers. They brought kind of a better punch in that game, but the Clippers just outlasted them down the stretch, just kind of outplayed them and went to go get that game. And I remember very specifically after the Clippers game, Coach Dagnall saying, we will learn a lot from these games. And I'm excited to see how we respond after these games, because we just went up against two incredibly high-level experienced teams, big teams, that threw their best punch at us.
Yeah.
That's where you learn the most. And the next two games were the Thunder responding to what they learned in those two matchups. Defeated the Utah Jazz down the stretch, and on the road in Salt Lake City, another very electric atmosphere. I mean, inside of that building, it's a very unique building.
It's like just being in a cave. Everybody's on top of you. There's no room to breathe.
Yeah, and when they're loud, it's loud in there and very hard to hear what's happening. And so that atmosphere was electric. And then you go to the Minnesota Timberwolves, which this series between these two teams, I mean, it's been so fun to watch all season long. It was a split series going into this game, and the home team had been the team that had taken the victory in each of those last two games. And it kind of looked like it was going to continue that trend around the third and early fourth quarter, because the Thunder were down by double digits, 11 points in that fourth quarter, and yet they walked away victorious.
And the great thing about both those victories, you laid out that the Thunder was down in the fourth quarter in that game in Minnesota, but both in Utah and in Minnesota, the Thunder got off to great starts.
Yes.
And that is a huge key that even Mark Dagnall has talked about within this 0-0 mindset and 48-minute game. He does sort of admit, like, when you're on the road, you have to get off to a good start, because if you get off to a bad start, you're just putting yourself in such a bad spot to potentially be able to come back. When you put yourself in a leading position, when you go up 30-15 the way the Thunder did, you give yourself that margin for error that when the home team goes on their big run, that you're still within striking distance to make that run down the stretch the way that the Thunder did. And the defense really stood up and delivered in that fourth quarter, held Minnesota to just 14 points. And OKC, who earlier in this month had a stretch of 10 straight games shooting above 50%, they went in and they won a road game against the number one team in the Western Conference, shooting under 40% from the field.
Which is the most impressive part of all of this. And that's not just my opinion. Coach Dagnall postgame said, typically, when you're not shooting well, one of the hardest things to do is to make sure that you were throwing your best punch defensively. And the fact that this team executed in crunch time and made sure that they dug in their heels defensively against a very potent Minnesota team with a lot of weapons on the floor, when the Thunder wasn't shooting the ball well and things just weren't going their way the entire game, that says a lot about this group and really the maturity of the second youngest team in the NBA to be able to pull that off down the road. But I think they're recognizing that, and something that really has been building within this team over the course of seasons and seasons now is that you can always control what you can control. And Coach Dagnall has really kind of built into their brains that shooting is the most variant aspect of this game. And so you cannot live or die by your shots. You have to have something that you can control each and every night. And the defense has really been that thing.
Yeah, it's one thing to defend like that. It's another thing to defend like that when you're not making any shots.
Right, when the wind's at your face.
Right, and to have the faith that things are going to turn around and the faith in the guys next to you that, hey, I'm going to keep delivering that pass. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go rogue. I'm not going to go ISO. I'm not going to clam up. Yeah. Right? I'm going to keep playing our style of basketball. We're going to keep defending the way that we have been, and eventually we'll get the stops that we need to get. And the Thunder just made the plays down the stretch. A massive step back three from Shea. It was his only made three of the game, and somehow he just knows when to pick them.
It's not even surprising anymore because at this point we've seen so many jaw-dropping plays from Shea, and so he hits a step back three when he hasn't hit one in the entire game and hits it at probably the most critical point in the entire game, and we're like, yep. Sounds about right. Yeah. That looks good.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. But, it wasn't just that shot. The Thunder got contributions all over the place, even on the road trip. Cason Wallace steps in the starting lineup in Utah and does an amazing job, goes for a career high 16 points in the game. And, a guy who's hasn't gotten a lot of minutes. Let me do another little setup here for you.
Okay.
Jaylin Williams comes in that game in Minnesota. He hasn't been a fixture in the rotation every single night, but he's been ready, and boy, did he deliver a couple of big buckets, a block, a steal, and really just kind of throwing himself around in that game.
Coach Dagnall has given Jay Will so much credit for his ability to kind of learn this new role this season because it's been a little bit different. You remember last year, he ended the regular season as a starter.
The every night starter.
Every night starter, the go-to center for the Thunder. And then coming into this year, he's playing more of a reserve role. The Thunder's not playing big every night. Sometimes they roll out a small lineup with Kenrich Williams at the 5, and maybe Jay Will isn't in the rotation that night. But every time he steps onto the floor, he is ready to rock and roll. And going up against Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, well, the Thunder needed a little bit of size, and Jay Will stepped up and delivered 5 points, 2 blocks. And you saw him in that walk-off interview. I mean, he brings so much joy to kind of every room that he's in with that electric smile, and just obviously he's a very big presence as well.
Yeah, the bubbliest security guard you'll ever see.
That's absolutely very accurate. And we actually had an awesome opportunity to get a chance to talk to Jay Will a little earlier this season. Here's that interview. We are now joined by the one and only Jaylin Williams. Jay Will, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Can't complain.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Jay Will, I got to say, one of the highlights of my offseason was coming down to Fort Smith, getting a chance to see your hometown, but also get a chance to talk to some of your high school coaches. And the one thing your high school coach said that Jaylin Williams needs is confidence from his coaches. Is that true? And if so, how has this Thunder coaching staff instilled confidence in you?
Yeah, I think confidence is a big thing in everybody's game. I think if you have ultimate confidence, that's when you're going to be your best self. And this Thunder coaching staff, team, organization has given me the confidence that I need to go out there and play. And I'm getting 3-point plays drawn up for me, and that's like a first since high school. So just the confidence they've given me, it lets me have confidence in myself.
How empowered do you feel as a second-year player as a leader on this team?
Yeah, one of the first things that they said when I first got drafted is everybody can be a leader. It's about who's doing the right thing. You're being a leader by doing the right thing. And I've always tried to do that. I've tried to be loud. I've tried to be talkative and know what I'm doing out there so I can help at somebody if I needed to. And I wouldn't call myself a leader, like a vet leader, but I try to lead and help where I can.
Yeah, we've heard that before. The leader is the person doing the right thing. On this team, does that just mean taking charges?
I mean, it means everything. I feel like everybody on our team has been a leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But seriously, when it comes to taking charges, did you think that skill would translate so well into the NBA?
Yeah, I did.
You did?
Yeah, when I saw everybody saying about that it wouldn't translate before I got drafted and before I played, like I just looked at it and laughed. Like, it's just about being in the right position, and that's not going to change. So
you saw from the beginning that this was something, just being in help side, that's being in the right spot at the right time. That's what was going through your head when you were coming into the NBA?
Yeah, regardless of if I'm taking a charge or going vertical or trying to block the shot, being in the right position is what gets me into the place to where I get to make those plays. And regardless if I'm there to take a charge or to go vertical, I have to be in that spot. And if I see that I'm able to take a charge, I'm going to be able to take it.
But it all starts with being in that right spot at the right time.
And knowing when to be there, when to rotate, how much time you have left in the paint, just things like that.
Is that something that you've had to work on being in the NBA, is keeping all of those nuances in mind when you're on the defensive end?
I feel like I got it down pretty fast, and it hasn't been something that just stays on my mind, but I feel like I'm good at getting out the paint if I need to.
Let's flip to the offensive end, because you have a pretty important role in the middle of the floor, kind of helping facilitate the offense from that nail position. Mm-hmm. How have you worked on that? How have you felt yourself grow in that spot?
Yeah, that's what I like. I like being able to have the ball in my hand and make decisions, make the right passes, and get teammates open. And being put in that position, I feel like I can strive and continue to do those things, especially with the guards that we have on our team. With them being so good, they make my job easy, getting them open, and they're going to do something with the rock every time. And just learning how certain guys want screens, if certain guys want me to roll / pop or roll fast or roll slow, short roll, just whatever it is, just learning those things was the biggest challenge.
I think people learned a lot about you last season and your passing ability. I don't think people realized that about you when you came into the league. Where did that ability come from for you?
I've always loved passing. My high school coach got on to me going into my 11th grade year because I was passing too much. He told me I needed to start scoring the ball more. And then going into my second year at Arkansas, I think the beginning of the year I was averaging like 8 assists a game until they told me I needed to start scoring more, and that's when it kind of went away. But I've always loved passing the ball, and it's just something I'm able to do up here now.
Was that a skill that you actively worked on, or was that something that you just kind of had naturally?
It's honestly something I've had naturally, just playing the game a lot and being able to read the floor, knowing guys who's going to back cut, who's looking for me to back cut or hit them on the back cut, just things like that.
I imagine watching film helped a lot with that. Will you tell us about how you were able to watch film growing up with your dad?
Yeah, my dad, honestly, it was annoying growing up, but now I understand why we did it. Like, I would be in the backyard with my cousins playing 21, and he would open up the blinds and be sitting in the window recording us play 21. And then when they would leave, he would make me sit down and watch the clips and be like, you need to do this. Like, you need to be going harder here, like stuff like that. And it went all the way through college, even to now. Like, if he's at home, he's recording the games, and then he watches them after the game's over, sends me videos, takes videos. And I bet you if I FaceTime my dad right now, he's watching basketball. Like, guaranteed.
Wow.
It's probably either one of my high school games, college games, something. He's watching one of my games.
I imagine at the time, as you mentioned, it was probably a little bit too much for you. But looking back on it, how important was that for your growth as a player?
Yeah, it was super important because that's what I rely on now. I rely on me being able to read the game, my sense for the game, my feel for the game. And I learned that through him making me watch so much basketball growing up.
Do you still watch basketball just in your free time now?
I watch a lot of NFL, but I watch a lot of the playoffs. We have so much basketball going on in our life if I'm not watching. So a lot of time I'm watching myself or our team or our games. I'm not really watching everybody else.
Speaking of this team, over the past couple of seasons, you guys have shown a lot of resilience in the face of adversity, a lot of ups and downs. How important is it on the flip side to make sure you guys maintain, humility in the face of success as well?
Yeah, I think that we understand that we're going into the season 0-0. That's one of the things that we preached is we don't know what's going to happen. We can't bring what we did last year into this season. So regardless of what it is, we just got to continue to get better. Going to every game, thinking that we can win it, and just getting better as a team throughout the year.
What about for you personally coming into the season, making sure that you're 0-0? Is that something that is important to you as well?
Yeah, I think that I just want to continue to learn. That's the main thing. Learn how to play with certain guys, get better in that aspect, learn the game better, and just work on myself, honestly, and just things like that.
All right, we've talked about Fort Smith a little bit, but for those who have never been, could you describe Fort Smith and what makes it so special?
I wouldn't say like if you're going there to have fun, that's not the place to go. But it's like a loving city. They're gonna love you if you give back. If you show them the love, they're gonna return it back to you. Everybody's nice. Like they're gonna this might sound crazy to say, but because it doesn't happen everywhere. But they're gonna hold the doors open for you. They're gonna say thank you if you do something. They're gonna say there's gonna be yes ma'am, no ma'am, no sir, yes sir. Like those things are like what it all is, and like everybody's just so nice there.
You, Isaiah, both coming out of Fort Smith. For you personally, do you remember when you fell in love with the game? And it sounds like your dad might have had a hand in that as well.
Yeah, I've always been in love with basketball. I've always wanted to be in the NBA. And like my goal was never to make it D1 or make it college. My goal has always been to make it to the NBA. And like my parents told me that like when I was a couple months old, I was in the gym watching my brothers and sisters play travel basketball. So it's like basketball has been around my life, my whole life. I played basketball year-round, school, Boys and Girls Club, and traveled like my whole life. So it's just been part of it for me.
So you don't remember a time where it wasn't about basketball for you?
No, I think the most time I had off of basketball was when COVID started. And I didn't even have off. Like me and my dad were going to parks to try to work out. And then when they took the rims off the goals, my dad bought a basketball goal and I worked out on the street. So it's like I've always been all about basketball.
So what was that time like for you when basketball got dialed back to that extent?
It was weird because it was right before I was going to college. So when you want to get better so you can play on that next level, it was hard. And that's also one of the reasons why I want to give back. Like, because for me, I was the best player, one of the best players in the state. I was going to Arkansas to college in the state, and I didn't have the resources to go work out. I couldn't go to a gym. I couldn't do this and that. And like to think that I didn't have the resources, like I couldn't imagine how it would be for somebody else. And like going through that time made me realize I wanted to give back. I wanted to change the parks and build gyms, do stuff like that. And it really gave me a whole different perspective.
That's one thing that when we went back to Fort Smith, everyone that we talked to said, Jaylin never forgets us. He always keeps us top of mind.
Yeah, I never could. Just because I've seen those faces my whole life. Mm-hmm. They've been at my Boys and Girls Club games. They've been in my high school, college games. So why would I forget them now?
Switching gears just a little bit, you told us you always knew you wanted to play in the NBA. Mm-hmm. Well, being in the NBA requires being a pro, right? Mm-hmm. What does your game day routine look like over the course of your time in the league?
Okay, so I'm going to say it's a home game. Okay. If we have a home game, we'll probably have workouts or like shoot around 10 maybe, be done. I'll go back to the house, eat, then I'll take a nap, 2-3 hour long nap. And then as soon as I wake up, it's time to go to the gym. And then I get here and go through all my stuff.
Is there any part of your pregame routine that has changed, or has that been your tried and true routine?
I've been taking naps since high school. Yeah, I've always went home to take naps before home games, or like if it was a away game, I would sleep on the bus on the way up there. Just always took naps before games.
So the nap is that's the most important part of your pregame routine.
Yeah, super important.
So does your game day start like when you wake up, or is it like when you wake up from that nap, that's when?
It starts from the night before, because I have to get a good night's sleep before, and then wake up, and then, nap time.
When you're in the arena, is there any aspect of your pregame routine that is very important to you?
This is at home. If I know my dad's at the game, I always have to see him before the game. Like we always had a thing where I can read his lips really good, where he always would tell me what I'm doing wrong. And of course I can't now because it's kind of far up there, but like I always need to know where my dad is in the arena. And then after that, I'm good.
Well, thank goodness Fort Smith isn't that far away from Oklahoma City. Your dad can be at just about every game if he wants to.
Yeah.
Well, Jaylin, thank you so much for taking the time. It's always so good talking to you. Great to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
It's always such a treat to get a chance to sit down and talk to Jay Will. Obviously, just such a bubbly personality, but great insights as always, and just so thoughtful with his answers.
Yeah, I mean, Paris, you do a great job getting these answers out of these guys, but I will say, it's not too hard to get Jay Will smiling and going and chit-chatting. So you've demonstrated great skill. This time,
the credit goes to Jay Will.
This time the credit goes to Jay Will, and it also is just a great opportunity to have like a ton of fun. Like you can tell you both are just having such great fun together.
Just always great to talk to him, and just for an extended amount of time. I mean, during the season, we only get to talk to him for about 2 or 3 minutes post game or something like that. So it was great to have that actual time to sit there and talk to him. All right. The Thunder now, as we mentioned, is home for one game. And then they hit the road, as one does in January. They will be gone for 3 games this time. That's right. Last road trip, 4 games. Road trip before that, 4 games.
Yeah.
So this is a nice, breezy little 3-game road trip.
Only 2 back-to-backs involved in the road trip.
Easy. Do that in my sleep. Totally nothing to worry about. But this game against the Portland Trail Blazers happens tomorrow. Then they head out to take on the San Antonio Spurs on Wednesday. Then on Friday, the Thunder plays the New Orleans Pelicans, and this is going to be the Thunder's first Friday night game that is actually going to be over the air for the first time.
Yeah, and you might remember the podcast that we did a couple weeks ago with Dan Mahoney, our vice president of broadcasting, who laid out kind of all the details about this. I'll give you a brief primer here, but just a reminder that every Friday night Thunder game from here on the rest of the season, that's 8 games, will be free and available with an antenna over the air in Oklahoma. And so here in OKC, that's channel 52, KSBI. And then if you have Cox, the game will be on channel 7. Now, if you're listening to us and you're up in Tulsa, that game will be on those Friday night games, channel 6.3. And then channel 53 on Cox. So all you need is a little antenna that plugs into the back of your TV, crystal clear picture that you're going to be able to get. And so this is another way that Thunder fans will be able to watch these games. Those games will not be on Bally Sports Oklahoma, but the remaining 32 games besides those 8 games will still be on Bally Sports.
This is something the Thunder is so extremely excited about. And obviously the fact that the team's on the road in New Orleans, we see a few Thunder fans be able to make it to road games, but the fact that not all 18,000 fans that typically come to Paycom Center are able to travel on the road, this is a great opportunity to get to see your Thunder play in action on Friday. But that is not the end of the road trip for OKC, because from there, they head up north and they take on Eastern Conference opponent, the Detroit Pistons. That game is going to be on Sunday, and it's going to be at 1 p.m. Central Time, thanks to a Detroit Lions win. So shout out to the Lions for an earlier tip-off time right there.
And to our director, Eric Date of our TV broadcast, who we're very, very happy for, and of course very grateful for, because that gives us a few extra hours that we can be back here at home before the second night of that back-to-back.
Yeah, so this road trip is wild. Starts with the back-to-back, ends with a back-to-back, and should be a lot of fun.
Yep, we'll be happy to we'll be happy to bring you Thunder basketball in whichever medium you receive it. Over these next handful of games.
That's right. But until then, we want to thank you for tuning in and watching today's podcast. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, Thunder up, and catch you later.